Welcome to Asala's Classroom Talks, where we mentor future lawyers, we foster critical thinking, and simplify the law. Tonight, it's such an honor to host the Oracle himself in constitutional law. It's our pleasure to have this conversation tonight with Professor Ben Sihanya, just drawing insights from his immense wisdom and knowledge. You're most welcome, Prof. And I'll pass the baton to you for brief words of introduction.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evelyn Asala, and also the viewers. It's a great pleasure to be here. And my main areas of interest in terms of research, teaching, lawyering, and mentoring are intellectual property, constitutional law, and education law and policy, and of course the related subjects. It's a pleasure to be in this forum to share perspectives or views with you and with the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And to our audience, should you have any question or comment for Prof, kindly just type it in the chat and he will attend to it once we are done with the conversation. Prof, now let's have a brief look at who you are and how you became who you are, and just helping our young lawyers who would like to walk your path to get the insights or draw some insights from your past and your present. Maybe you can briefly just give us a synopsis, Prof. Why did you think of constitutional law? Why constitutional law, and what is this that drew you, to have this intellectual passion for constitutional law?
So thank you so much, Dr. Sala. Why con law, really? If you allow that. Why con law and why not any other subject for that matter? Well, three-pronged, inspired by the Holy Trinity. Number one is that con law deals with important questions about the Bill of Rights, about human rights, about life, about liberty, about livelihood, which are really, really, really fundamental. And livelihood in there includes land, property, etc., etc. So con law addresses very, very core issues in our lives. Well, secondly, is that as we all know, con law is taught in first year, almost in all schools, probably in the world, or let me be specific, in Kenya and Africa, and also in the West. And therefore, I thought as the struggles became intense, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, I got interested in con law, but also for different reasons. After the 2000 NAC revolution, which was supposed to answer the questions that we had been asking since independence in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then I got interested at that, and we thought that it was a NAC revolution. But unfortunately, as I've been trying to demonstrate in my work, it ended up with a Kibaki counter-revolution, which really nullified a lot of the gains that we thought we were getting at 2000, because many of us were involved in these processes leading to Kibaki coming to power. So those are some of the three issues that really influenced me: the Bill of Rights questions, fundamental questions, the questions of the struggles that I've lived through, and many of us have lived through, and then the questions of that, the promise that never was, that was actually frustrated, and through that, the Kibaki counter-revolution.
Okay, thank you, Prof. And let's now look back at your days as a student, and we would like, we are eager to learn from you and just to hear some of these formative experiences that you think mostly shaped your intellectual path and just gave you the sense of the lawyer that you are today. What are these experiences as a student?
Yeah, I can see that you are really focusing on a personal experience, and I think it is important. With time, it's becoming very, very clear that experience is really, really important, and that experiential learning, living through processes helps shape a lot of our worldview, our perspective on life, and even on law. So for me, three key ones were important in my formative years, and many of them directly influenced by what I have come to be, and some subconsciously. And these three are: I was born in the mid 60s, and I lived through the conscious live from early 70s. From 70s, we were aware of what was happening. And one is that my father was a school teacher, primary school teacher, teaching maths, English, and Kiswahili, an excellent combination. And throughout his life, until he died when I was joining first year in 1988, he and many others died mourning T.J. Mboya, the Mboya assassination. And we lived through that. And I was saying, what is this? So, and I'm glad that these issues are now coming up in really important debates. Number two, he and many others lived mourning Clement Michael George Arguing Skodek, who was the first African lawyer in Kenya, and who had been a Mau Mau lawyer, and who the people would sing about him when I was young, that this is one person who decided the cases or chaired the cases in his own home, in his own house. It was sung in Luo. And these things were sticking in my mind, that what is really happening? What kind of society are we living in? And thirdly, of course, as we were coming to university, there were issues about electoral injustices like Mlolongo, few voting elections of 1988, thoroughly rigged, contrary to all known constitutional principles in the world, etc., etc. Probably, for example, queuing, even if it's raining, you queue there, and the longest line becomes the shortest, etc. That we are seeing. So the electoral malpractices and injustices of the Kenyatta 1 years, of the Moi years, electoral governance and related limitations in opportunity and general hegemony, which we could feel in our skins. We grew up when people really had to sometimes change their names from especially the Luo names. They had to change them to other names because they were even fearing that CPE would be marked against. That's the context which we grew up, which we lived through. And you are not seeing many senior people coming from government. You didn't see many serious people with businesses, etc., whom you could say are having loans and stuff from the government. So there was a question of really limited opportunity. That is the village I grew up in. And that's the village I learned that there was serious injustices in this country that needed to be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And you just remind me, when I was young, I was being told of stories of people who had changed their names because you couldn't explain why some people are being called by certain names. And now with your, with your sharing, it just helps me now put it into context to help appreciate the changing times. And Prof, what are these two characteristics or habits that you had that you think molded you into the person that you are today?
Well, let me give you three brief ones, which will, rather than two long ones, inspired by the Holy Trinity. Number one is the wisdom of Solomon, and the wisdom I learned from my parents and my grandparents. Wisdom, the quest for wisdom, just seeking knowledge or wisdom. Two is the quest for the justice of Amos, and the justice of that my parents and my grandparents told us about in a family context, in a national context, in a family context, in a local context as well. And thirdly is that the concept of shared prosperity and empathy that is associated with Jesus Christ. And I was brought up under what used to be called Roman Catholicism, just call it Catholicism. And those were important value systems that have influenced me, and I've sought to do what I can in that regard. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. And if you were to take it a little bit further, Prof, there comes a time in one's life, especially for persons who are of your stature in this society, something happens in your life and you experience a turning point that completely changes or turns your life around to completely never be the same again. What was this turning point or moment for you, whether in academia or in whatever aspect that is related to your field of expertise?
Well, let me give you, I would not give you one but let me give just three brief ones. Number one, Maseno School and completing Maseno School. That was a very unlikely matter because of questions of fees, questions of the teachers, especially those teaching arts. Most of them had been transferred to other schools. This is the late 80s. And that was a very unlikely thing. So completing, but in Maseno, in spite of those challenges, also, for people growing up at that level, also quality and quantity of food was also an issue in the high school. But we always said that you can't come to Maseno and fail. How could you start explaining that in case you had to explain anyway? So I think that was a big challenge, that even completing Maseno School was like a miracle, because I went second term, Form 5, and in A levels especially, Form 5, second term, third term, I went out of it, away from school for fees and related, and these challenges that both teachers, we had to self-teach and get some materials from other schools to read, especially the arts. That was something, and that is actually what led me to come to the university. And when I came to the university, a major turning point, to use, or turning point, to use your phrase, Dr. Sarla, was when I approached Professor J.B. Ojwang, who taught us con law, and at the end of the first year, and I asked that I needed to do some research and also get some money so that I could support my recently widowed mother and my siblings. And he gave me a letter that took me to be an intern earning 1,000 shillings a month under the then Dr. Kalesas Juma of African Center for Technology Studies. And that was a turning point, because that's where I also studied intellectual property, environmental and natural resources law, etc., which were not being taught at university at the same time. And I also learned about research, how to research at that early age. That was a turning point. That was an excellent mentoring opportunity. And I think even the idea of mentoring that I later on started in the 90s, when that word was very rare. You had guidance and counseling, you had coaching, but you didn't have mentoring, was partly influenced by the mentoring I got at this Science and Technology Policy Research Institute that was also doing environmental law. Dr. Kalesas Juma would later on become Professor Kalesas Juma at Harvard, and unfortunately we lost him in 2017. The third is Warwick and Stanford gave me a different perspective about life, about the law, and also I now, while I'd been focusing on environmental natural resources law, human rights law, IP, I also now brought in much more much other perspectives in intellectual property itself, in issues of cyber law, ICT law, and enriched my understanding of governance. At Warwick, we were taught by former Professor Issa Shivji, who is one of the leading constitutional labor and land lawyers in this continent. Stanford, of course, strengthened my IP and taught me quite a lot about these issues of IP and STI law generally, Science, Technology, and Innovation law and related issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And, just having listened to you, it appears that mentorship has really played a major role in your journey. And could we therefore say that Professor J.B. Ojwang and Professor Issa Shivji were your role models or your mentors?
Yes, in law, Professor Ojwang was my mentor. He taught us quite well in terms of doctrine, etc., etc. Of course, much later when he went to the Supreme Court, that's a different a debate for another day. Because because in High Court we still followed him, and he was still very, very progressive. In the Supreme Court, it's the debate for another day in terms of the jurisprudence that he contributed to. So yes, and many who were supervised by him appreciated how thorough he was, but then you got the appropriate marks if you responded to his many very incisive and very good questions. I know so many things. He was very thorough. And Professor Issa Shivji taught us, especially introduced us to a nuanced understanding of the work of Karl Marx, because I think most people either reject or don't read Karl Marx, or when they read it with slogans in mind, like the young Hegelians, rather than really understanding what Marx was talking about. Then, so you could even understand Marx properly and then apply and even critique Marx. And that's something that we really learned from Shivji. But in general, Professor Kalasa Juma was a major one. And in Stanford, I had also many mentors, like Professor Paul Goldstein in global father of copyright, and Professor Larry Lessig in Con law and cyber law. So I've been lucky. Margaret Jane Redding, property rights, etc., etc.
Yeah, and Prof, how would you advise young lawyers to actively seek mentorship today? What should they do, to seek for this mentorship and use it positively?
Well, yeah. The Gospels, I think, especially Matthew and others, say that seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you, etc. Many times it's a question of seeking, because one of the reasons why I started mentoring in the late 90s, when I started teaching, it was that we realized that the numbers, even at the university, at LLB, were increasing. Now they are really, really large. That was LLB. Masters was still a very small class. PhD was almost non-existent, also just emerging. But these days, you can see that whether you are talking about LLB, you are talking about LLM or PhD, the numbers are really, really huge relative to the availability of human resources to give them personalized, individual, customized, bespoke attention. And therefore, one needs to seek, and I know many have been seeking from me, from my colleagues, email, etc., etc., and then keep communicating appropriately. From if it's email, when there are some things which are just best communicated by email, not text messages. I know that we are in a different world, but because sometimes somebody is really, really busy, etc., etc., they engage in other matters. So even how to communicate and what to communicate and how to follow through the mentoring process. It's really unfortunate, Dr. Sala, that the mentoring opportunities are fewer and fewer, because even those who could do the mentoring have to struggle with the daily intellectual, daily administrative, daily financial challenges, because the academy is not receiving the attention that it deserves. So this is a very complex area, but I still encourage that they seek mentoring. There are lecturers to do mentoring. There are people in law firms. There are people in the NGO or PBO world, public benefit organizations world, in government offices, etc., mentoring, externship, etc., they should continue to apply, even though the opportunities are fewer and fewer, and keep at it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. That's a very sensitive area because there's a huge gap in mentorship. And you just remind me when you talk of communication, a student who approached me for a reference letter, I told them to do a draft, and they're sending me bits and bits of messages on WhatsApp. And I'm like, is this your draft letter? And the student tells me just copy paste. And I'm like, yeah, this is not it. So I think students should avail themselves for mentorship and just guidance on how to go about some of these things. They may look very small or irrelevant at some point, but they really count on your journey to your professional life. So thank you so much,
Dr.
Prof, for
Stella,
those insights. Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Stella, I can't emphasize enough this issue of communication, and especially in the post-COVID era, because institutionally and individually, there is an assumption that we are always ready to respond to WhatsApp messages and that we are almost all duty bound. And that for some of us who joined the university as lecturers in the 90s, even a lecturer, like I joined as an assistant lecturer, and also initially actually part-time lecturer. Even those days, we even had secretaries who were expected to support even an assistant lecturer with respect to some matters, administrative stuff. There was the idea of a messenger, etc. There were so many things. But as you know, both technologically and in terms of HR, human resource availability, it is now assumed that the lecturer is the personal messenger, is the personal telephone operator. You remember there used to be telephone operators. There is the secretary, and WhatsApp by its nature requires immediate response. There are some issues that as a lecturer, as a mentor, you need to consult your assistants, because some of these things we can't do them alone. And if everything is being subjected to WhatsApp, especially post-COVID era, some matters, it can only be like for confirming something. Oh, did you receive the email I sent you? Something that is probably acceptable. But a lot of material which really belong to email are now increasingly coming through only WhatsApp. And you are expected to respond to these clerical, logistical matters, logistical, which are really putting a very heavy toll on time for research. So, and there is also something that I've seen with some mentees. A mentee comes to you and either texts you by WhatsApp or meets you some of us talk anywhere to mentees or to our students or mentees. And then somebody just says, but can you give me the email address of LSK? And I said, God, that is original. You want to engage me intellectually, or you want to engage me about the email address of, surely. And there are better resources that you can get to deal with that, so that I deal with what is the role of LSK in governance. Yes, you can ask me anywhere in the street. But what is the email of I don't know who and who, even however high ranking in office they are. There's some things you don't ask some people. You just don't. Let me leave it there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Your resources and the resources well and time well, and including our mentors, how we utilize them. Thanks. It's a major issue.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, thank you for just highlighting that, because really we have so much on our hands and you need to balance a lot. So students subjecting you to social media for things that are not really worth it, you feel it's taking toll on your academic time. Prof, how would you describe your journey in academia? Has it been an easy one? Have you faced challenges? And if any, how did you deal with it?
I know you know that it has
I
never
may not
been
know.
easy. I know you know, and it's an open book, which okay, fine.
Mhm.
Let me put it this way. Thanks, because it's not personal. Sorry, it's not personal. I'm just a joke, which is not funny.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's as like any other person, it's been challenging. Except some of us have had unnecessary challenges. It's some which you just reflect on and say that what is this? All of us, I mean, to get to any level, certainly we face challenges. Uh, for me, and that's normal, that's part of life.
Yeah.
But then the challenges, some of the challenges I would really, really pay attention to, I think, have been of uh, you really want to do the best, your best. You also want to give to the best of your ability to society, especially through mentees, students and mentees and colleagues. But you constantly have these nagging sadists. I've called them power sadists. And they are psychopaths who believe that at every point they must frustrate whether your personal progress or what you are trying to assist others to achieve, whether it's intellectual, professional, academic, etc., etc. And
Mhm.
some of them are so arrogant and think they really don't know. You are so naive, you are so stupid. Or even if you know, utadu. And I'm sorry, but in the past, especially consistently in the post Kibaki, in the era beginning about 03, I think some of these things have been quite intense. Uh, and I am aware it's not just me. I'm aware it's people I know or people I try to work with or to help. And I just, yeah, so many people have told me, just get out and say these things and even name names. But I said, when I do and let them enjoy it, they let them have fun. Yeah. And most of this, unfortunately, has been based on uh, surprise perspectives, the perspectives I take, which is consistent. And I've now
Mhm.
said where it comes from. It's as consistent as Chinua Achebe's or as Elisha Stephen Atieno Diambo's. And there's a way it comes from somewhere, from experience. So this, yeah, and most of them are basically just uh, tribal terrorists. And I think that beyond tribal bigots, and they are psychopaths. And what encourages me is that what I started like that has influenced the way I teach con law, and how I started teaching it is now being accepted by even people who used to say, "Ah, what are you talking about? Why are you criticizing some of these guys?" And now they are they are also joining in. When I started teaching con law, I used to talk about how unjust the Kenyatta One system was, but that unfortunately many people did not see it that way, even at that time. Only a few did, but now increasingly people are seeing that. Uh, you come into all these periods, and I think the Kenya has become a more intolerant society, is increasingly since Kibaki, and you call it Kibaki counter revolution, which then ushered in Kenyatta 2, etc., etc. And
Mhm.
some people later, much more recently, I've heard some people say, "Oh, Kenya has been unjust," and especially they make comments about the now. And I tell them, look, this is what some of us have been saying all these years. We have been talking about the injustices. We have been talking about this. Don't just feel that there's an injustice if you or your relative is affected. Some people have lived throughout their life throughout, and that consider democracy is not instant coffee, that you expect certain fundamental changes within a day or two. So whatever, I think that is where I come from. But I constantly read, I constantly reflect, I practice also some resting and prayer, or 3 hours: reading, reflecting, resting, and prayer, to really help me deal with this. Because sometimes we are human beings. Sometimes you can feel overwhelmed, but then you say it is darkest at dawn. It is darkest at dawn, and that's what I would really still tell people, that challenges are going to be there. Some of them are because of not using our time and our resources well. Some are because of certain constraints are being placed on deliberately against your success or against the success of people around you, etc. And this hurts me, because it's also people I know who should be making progress and deserve the best don't get it because of these same constraints. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, having listened to you, you're advising people to be reflective and to stay in the place of prayer, right? Whenever you're faced with this kind of challenges, so that you can get yourself out of them. Thank you very much, Prof. And also, just drawing from all this, Prof, have you made a mistake in your professional journey? You know, that you look back and say, oh, I ought not to have done this. I would have done it differently. Have you made such a mistake, and how did you recover, if at all?
Yeah, I think, experience, life. Maybe let me give some examples. I sometimes I wonder whether I should have studied history instead of geography at A levels. I've said that on a balance, well, that's okay. But sometimes I used to say, should I have done that? But, okay, partly because history was being taught very, very, very well. And I think that the teacher there was giving very, very good insights. But then I've tried to remedy that by reading and listening to serious historians, because history is a very, very important subject. But I couldn't have taken history and geography at the same time, because I was already studying for 4 principles, and I went to A levels late. So that's something that sometimes I wonder. But I'm glad that I've forgiven myself, and I said it was okay. Geography also helped me understand world problems, Kenyan problems and development. So there's no big deal. There's another mistake which. I think some have told me it was a mistake, and sometimes I also think it was fully joining the bar. I only opened Sianya Advocates in 2020. Some thought I was admitted in 1993. So part of that time, whenever I went to court, I went through other advocates' firms. And sometimes I regret, sometimes I don't, because I don't think I would have balanced. Okay, this is how I've forgiven myself. That I'm try working to forgive myself, which is also not sometimes difficult. By saying that, really, focusing attention on the academy with those artificial sadistic challenges, I don't think I would have easily balanced from the word go. But after learning the academy much more carefully and trying to do quite a bit of what I wanted to do. Not that I've accomplished 90% of my academic program. No. Then 2020 was. But also, I think this was also something that it's not like I consciously woke up and went to open a law firm. It's also motivated to a large extent by the sadistic mechanics. Some cartel taking you to EACC for doing public service, for doing community service, which we are expected to do. And they are taking you to EACC. And you look at these guys, that simply because of certain competitive matters in administration. And you look at these guys, actually, even with writing to you a notice to show cause. And you look at them and say, You are not a state officer. You are not an official of a political party. You are in a dispute resolution tribunal. Even judges were saying, serious judges, progressive judges were saying that even judges could actually perform that because they are state officers, but they are not going to be political party officials because disciplinary committee is not a party official position. So these are some of the challenges. Actually, there's even an earlier time that I nearly missed going to the bar. That was an earlier time. Because as I said earlier, I was keener on research, and I was being persuaded by some of my mentors that, you are very good at research. I don't think that the bar will be good for you. But now he's a judge. A judge friend of mine told me, something to the effect that don't be stupid, go to the bar, go to Kenya School of Law, get the practice in Africa certificate. If you don't want to practice, you will keep it. If you think you will change your mind. So that's why these days I constantly tell our students that please, whatever your future plans are, if you have come to the law school, as in university, please try to go to Kenya School of Law. Please make an effort. I know there can be fees challenges, etc., but try to make an effort to go with your cohort because of teamwork and other related issues, farm work. Whatever you want to do in the future, even if you want to be an in-house counsel, you want to be an advocate, you want to be a lecturer, you can still you can still make those choices, but you will have more options. But anyway, these days the constitution and the statutes make it very, very difficult for a lawyer to operate without going to Kenya School of Law. But those days, there were so many opportunities that you didn't need an advocate certificate. Legal officer, you could be in many organizations without being an advocate. But these days, most of the opportunities under the constitution and under the statutes and regulations are based on. So those are some of the mistakes that I made or nearly made, and I wasn't very enthusiastic about being an advocate those early years. So, but now I am glad that I understand quite a bit what's happening in the bar, the practice-related issues, and also the academic issues, and the integration is quite important in the interdisciplinarity.
Yeah, because Prof, when you talk to some of our colleagues who, went the two-way, they'll cite the inadequate balance between the two. So I think perhaps in your case, it wasn't a bad mistake. After all, I think you have excelled and distinguished yourself in academia. So let us now look back, at your distinguished career, in constitutional law particularly. What would you say has been the evolving nature of constitutional law, from its doctrinal foundations to its practical realities? How has constitutional law evolved?
Wow. How has constitutional law evolved?
Con law evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, so the way you framed it, again, it is experiential, I think. Again, it is with some assumption, which is true, that I am what the Gen Zs would call ancestor or fossil. And I can say that we were there, we've seen it all, which is really true. I think sometimes I reflect on these things and say that, this is now like history. Some of it is even ancient history, but we were there, we observed it.
Yeah.
So just a few, maybe probably just 3. So we talked about those. Number one, we talked about those struggles of the 60s into the early 90s. And then, surprise, surprise, in 91, the Moi regime relents and allows a very quick about turn in a few weeks to allow the repeal of the infamous Section 2A of the 1969 Constitution, which was about there shall be only one party in Kenya, KANU, and that meant a lot. no opposition whatsoever. Now it would have been the jure from 1982. Let history record that it was not just Moi who introduced de jure status, it was with Kibaki as vice president, Charles Njonjo as AG, and that was a very happy moment for them in 1982. But by 1991, Moi relents and really Section 2A is repealed to allow multipartyism. Not sufficient development, but I think it was quite something, because at the time, the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy was a big promise, the promise of Ford. Again, this can be discussed in the relevant forum, and how the Ford Revolution was also betrayed by latter-day Democrats and latter-day human rights activists. Those who came to human rights simply because of the opportunity that they had enjoyed under Kenyatta One had been limited, not on principle. Then 97 is also related to that, what is called IPPG, Inter-Parties Parliamentary Group, facilitating certain minimal reforms just before elections. Those as of now, at this point, they may sound minor, but as we witnessed these, they made certain changes in terms of electoral justice and electoral politics, especially competitive politics and governance and related issues. Then 2002 was a major issue, and some of us were now like of age to participate, especially from intellectual, ideological, and political engagement. And we were in the NAC campaign, in the Kibaki campaign. So when we are talking about Kibaki, somebody we put, we also gave our input to the process, and we thought that we could say he was owned by Kenyans, unlike Kenyatta One and Moi, who had largely rigged their system themselves into power without needing most of the population. But Kibaki came because of the population, yote yawezekana issue. Everything is possible. So that NAC revolution, and then the experience of the counter-revolution, we can see that there were positive transformations, positive changes, but also metamorphosis that was in the negative direction. 2010, Kozio also came, we witnessed it, and this was a project that was, some people would trace it to the 60s, others would trace it immediately to 1988, no longer, but others would say, no, it's more traceable to probably 1997, the failure of IPPG to deliver substantial structural reforms, and then that would lead to then 2002, then NAC revolution, the immediate counter-revolution, 2007 counter-revolution by Kibaki, rigging elections and being sworn in at midnight with candlelight, etc. And then here you would say that what is the summary of all this? Con democracy has not developed in a linear way, the way some people argue. It's not been linear. It's been what you would call sometimes zigzags. Sometimes it's what one would say 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, and some would say, but we are still progressing. So that's how and that it's not been like instant coffee. It's not like been linear. It's not, like very smooth. And that's one of the reasons why 2010, which was supposed to be transformative, revolutionary, and progressive, it doesn't seem to be delivering, because certain social-cultural fundamentals and structural matters in our politics, in our political economy, have not been addressed. Have we addressed the Kenyatta oathings, which were based on hatred, not on competition, but hatred of 1969? Some of us expected Uhuru Kenyatta to have this as a great opportunity to tell us that, hey, you guys, we are building a new Kenya. and that we know some things have happened, including oathing. There have been TGRC reports. What? Let's resolve this. But immediately we didn't see serious commitments on that. That politics is built on hatred, on certain cultural and hegemonic perspectives. Then you can, however good your constitution is, without the socio-cultural, structural matters, philosophical, etc., unless we disavow some of these issues like oathing, etc., I don't think we will correct the fundamentals.
Mhm. Well, thank you very much, Prof. And now, just reflecting on all these transformative constitutional moments, yeah, what would you say has been your most meaningful contribution in this field of constitutional law, whether through a case that you took up or publications or negotiations, whatever kind of intervention that you as a person has contributed?
Dr. Salah, I want to tell you that this is partly personal effort, 2, teamwork, and 3, luck. That probably the way the stars were arranged, which is beyond me. What do I mean? Luckily, it's been on all the 3. I can mention something. Cases, Maina Kiai, all the way to the Supreme Court. I'll explain briefly. Negotiations and constitutional engineering, if you like that phrase, BBI. And I'll explain. Scholarship, Quadralca, which I'm told is being cited in so many areas, with a view to saying that this is a different way of reading constitutional law. And also some saying, well, why are you criticizing some of us? And I say, God, this is not personal. Of course, there are some areas which, are being edited to reflect certain different perspectives that I have, and to be more sensitive to certain perspectives that I've also had. So Maina Kiai, what about Maina Kiai? It happened that I was at KICC as Kibaki worked very hard with Martha Karua and others and Kivuitu to rig elections in 2007. And we spent 3 nights there. My colleagues and I have written on that, and there was always denial that no, those elections were not rigged, etc. But even many participants in the rigging process have now, especially in 2022 elections, agreed that they were. So that's we were at KICC, and then in 2013 we were at Bomas. So, and then we are aware of what happened in 2007, that even going to court was not an option because the Chief Justice Johnson Evans Gicheru, who basically came from Kibaki's backyard village, and also who was also ushered in a very acrimonious way of throwing out Chunga. Not that Chunga did not have his sins, but all that, there was no way that anybody serious could go to court in 2007. And others were being out, they were being told, go to court, knowing that, the judicial system had been rigged by Justice Gicheru and others, especially including appointment of one judge to deal with certain JR applications that were important in this electoral process. So all those things were there. And also previously, the court had dealt with presidential election petitions, whether it is Matiba or Kibaki petitions, in a way that was basically focusing on technicalities of procedure rather than substantial justice. So Maina Kiai, we were, I think we were having, it was during a break. I'll check. And then we were in the village, and a lawyer friend of mine, some lawyer friends of mine visited in the village. And we were just talking, and I said that, you people, I was traumatized but at KICC. In KICC, your tribe mattered. And especially if you did belong to the Kibaki camp. And it was terrible, even moving there. And we spent there 3 days in the same clothes, because if you get out and you don't belong to the right tribe, you can't come back. And yet we were supposed to be accredited observers. And I said, how can we avoid KICC? Why doesn't the US have, how the US doesn't have KICC? They don't have bombers. And we had just agreed, let's go. And actually, I argued like this. In the US, at the time, the presidential candidates, whether it was Obama or whoever it is, they have their pen, their paper, and calculator. They don't have superior knowledge of the outcome of results. They are presidential candidates. How come that in Kenya, some seem to have superior knowledge of what the outcome is? Because even when we were at KICC, we were being told that the range is going to be like this. Kibaki was trailing, but some people were whispering that, he'll win by this. And we were saying, what the nonsense is this? So please note, it's been a tough period. So we say that let's read the Constitution and say that then we discovered that there's nothing called provisional results, which ECK had been using. There's nothing provisional. Provisional was used as a window to allow Georgia, allow Tharaka Nithi to their results, and among others, about 60 or so constituencies to be, many of them to be changed and to be many times exceeding even the registered voters. And they were being changed. Mara is 80,000, 75,000. Mara is 90,000. Mara is 120,000. So that's to cut a long story short, we brought up this and said that there's nothing like provisional results. The results that have been now announced at the polling station, and then there are results that are announced at the constituency level, because the Kenya is divided into 290 constituencies for purpose of presidential elections. There was nothing in the constitution like a national tallying center. So we brought the case and it succeeded. Well, we succeeded. High Court, I think 5-judge bench, Court of Appeal. We also got all. Basically, this was unanimous decisions. And later on, IBC, as an afterthought, went appealed through the back door very late to the Supreme Court, and basically the outcome was still the same. And why is Maina Kiai important? And who was Maina Kiai? Maina Kiai and Khelef were serious human rights lawyers who they became, this is important for public interest lawyering and lawyers, that they bore the name of the case because they were known to be committed conservative Democrats, electoral justice people, and they were not easy to intimidate, and they were not easy to bribe. So even who your client is, who is going to be the petitioner, is important, because in these electoral matters and public interest matters, many have been intimidated, many have been bribed to drop the case. So, yeah. Well, that is, Maina Kiai was the basis actually of Raila 2017, the invalidation, because IBC ignored all that we were doing in Maina Kiai and thought that this is a joke, that they proceeded to do whatever they had been doing before, with even forms that were completely illegitimate, completely invalid, etc., etc. Didn't have security features, nakadhalika. Then I've talked about BBI, and I'll be brief because BBI is a recent matter that many people are aware of. BBI taught some of us that constitutional reform will have to be done at one point. There is need for the constitutional reforms. For example, as of now, presidential election petitions are 14 days. Even the judges have said at least 30 days. 30 days would be okay. As we speak now, the term of the DCJ is not specifically stipulated in the Constitution, unlike that of CJ, which means that if one becomes a DCJ at around 25, 26, they can be there for about, is it about almost 40 years? Is it 45, etc.? Because there's only retirement age, etc. There are issues about sharing power within the mainstream, the president, deputy president, and the idea of a prime minister is now being accepted by almost all, or a similar office, whether you want to call them prime cabinet secretary, etc. So there are so many issues. The issue of gender in electoral process cannot be resolved without a constitutional amendment. The issue of 47 counties, really? Counties being both legislative and executive units, really? Governments? No. Probably administrative units, probably 10 to 16 legislative units and executive units, but 47 can be administrative units. But that there are also lawmaking with this huge issue of MCAs and bureaucracy, etc. The budget is just not, and it's not just the budget. If you look at the objectives of devolution, bringing government nearer to the people, maybe making it more participatory, etc., and making it efficient and delivering. These bureaucracies cannot deliver, and they are very, very expensive, etc. Compare Kenya's devolved units with the US 50. 50. The US is a subcontinent with a huge GDP and stuff like that. Compare that with Nigeria, 36. Compare the population size and other parameters. So at one point we will have to deal with it. That's the lesson we learned in BBI. So constitutional, legislative, policy, and administrative reforms. But starting probably with policy reforms would be key. I know whenever people talk about constitutional reform, I know why they fear, and they are justified. It's because there can be some legitimate issues that require reform. But before you know it, some illegitimate issues are sneaked in at the last minute without participation. So I know that is a major fear for people. But I think moving into the future, there would be need to discuss some of these issues. Thanks. Okay, I think I talked about what? Quadralca, I think I already explained. Quadralca is constitutional democracy and administrative regulation and administrative law. Constitutional democracy, regulation and administrative law in Kenya and Africa, and which I'm trying to read the constitutional law in Kenya and Africa by saying that how do we balance liberty with power? It's not obvious that liberty, power must always be limited as that's the only issue. No, it's reasonable power, appropriate power. How do we deal with issues of the Bill of Rights, etc., etc.? How do we deal with and the new perspectives on that? How do we deal with the problems, the challenges of the structure of government, and how do we bring political scientists to work closely with administrative lawyers and con lawyers, because historically we've not been working together, and we really need to work together. Among other lawyers, of course, among other lawyers, we really need to work together, all of us, including criminal lawyers. Con lawyers should also work with criminal lawyers, so that we enrich our.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. And actually, we are now beneficiaries. We've seen some positive developments in terms of the reforms within the electoral unit, and we still keep hoping that it will go, a higher mile, and just to adopt what is really the best constitutional moment for Kenyans. Now, Prof, you mentioned about, the beauty of having a good client who cannot be compromised through intimidation, through the lure of money. Yeah. And many times advocates find themselves on crossroads. Yeah. You're supposed to protect the public and facilitate justice, but again, you're being lured on the side of promoting injustice just because there is real money, that is pulling you on these sides. And where you stand in your distinguished career, you have, the option, especially of just getting lured to facilitate injustice because you want to make a kill in terms of making money. what does it take, Prof, to make the right choice, and that you would advise young lawyers to keep in mind when faced with these difficult choices?
Well, thanks. Seek ye first the following three, and everything else shall be given unto thee, young lawyers, law students.
Yeah.
First, seek skills, knowledge, attitudes, values, and innovation. Yes, we call it SCAVI. Skills, knowledge, attitude, values, and innovation. Just do the 3 R's: reading, reflecting, resting, doing a balanced diet like that. Choose 2 to 3 core law areas. Of course, especially as students, you don't have much of a choice. You have to study all the subjects. But try to, even as students, try to start saying that these are the subjects that I would really prefer to advance in. But these other ones, of course, I also need to pass, etc. Because even in high school, we used to do that. There are certain subjects like maths. Some of us treated that as a reducing agent. Those are subjects that we really did a lot of practice in the early periods and just wanted to pass very highly to reduce as a reducing agent to improve your aggregate. But were conflicted on whether to study it much later, etc., etc. Then, but so choose certain subjects that you really would. Then, but I've also said that, but balance the subject. Then, and that's also lawyers. But it's in the law school, it's in the university, it's in KSL. It's also in the bar, the lawyering bar, the bar related to the judiciary. I'm not talking about Sabina Joy or Karumainga. Yeah, so that it's good to even the bar to show it's good because we are encouraged to have like a niche. Yeah, so which will bring some. Then number 2 is that be consistent and be smart about it. Smart in the, yes, we all know what smart is. Maybe and be consistent about it. And number 3 is that observe principles of integrity, which are luckily now they are in many of them are in Article 10. Those values are important. Many of them are in Chapter 6, and many of them are in Article 232. Much as they tend to focus on the state officers and public officers, they are also very, very important at a personal level. Yeah. So those will guide us. But number 3 is it's okay to seek the legit bag, the legit bag, legit. I always insist on legit bag because some of us, Dr. Sala, the way I think that could also have been a mistake. I should also add it as a mistake. When some of us came to law, the way I've told you, making money was like not quite we didn't develop skills on that. Or let me just even say, some of us were brought up in the village on the principles of the issue of happy are you who are poor, someone on the mount, someone on the plain, depending on the gospel that we read, whether Matthew or Luke. Happy are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. That is what transmitted to some of us, not just by colonial Christianity, but also the regimes that we went through that condemned sections of our society to poverty and made some people, I must say, some of us even celebrated that those who are poor will inherit the kingdom of God. It's more difficult for a rich person to go to heaven. It's more difficult it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to go. And some of us we used to believe that as important as literal and even aspiring to be remain in that condition. So we didn't internally. That's how stupid some of us have been. And so some of us discovered the significance of money. Money is not evil per se. Much as some people say money is the cause of all evil. No. Wealth is glorious, so say the Chinese. But wealth obtained in a legit manner and also used for shared prosperity. And some of us came to this realization too late, and I think I would still encourage. And luckily, the younger people have the gig economy. Unfortunately, of course, there are issues of taxes and stuff like that on content creators, etc., and they don't have enough in terms of internships and stuff like that. But making money is a legit issue in the bar, and the bar is the legal profession is supposed to be a profession that prides itself in helping others secure justice, in administration of the law, and also with mercy. So it's about law, it's about justice, it's about mercy. So a lawyer who doesn't appreciate justice is like a priest who in Christianity who doesn't recognize the resurrection of Christ. But then, so those are some of the issues that have been informing. And I think lawyers and the law students and younger lawyers should really work on this. And I know some are doing that. And that's why even in the academy, I've been saying this. I've been quoting my friend, my teacher, Chinua Achebe, our teacher, who says that the only quote that Okonkwo used to like from his father, Unoka, who was otherwise a very lazy person and owed everybody everything, so a lot, he was that you cannot live in the banks of River Niger. Let me say, you can't live in the banks of River Nzoia, River Yala, River Tana, River Athi, and wash your hands with spittle. So in the academy, I know that I've talked to many younger lawyers who don't think the academy is an option, who don't think the traditional bar is an option, because money is being made by only a few. And everybody knows. I know some people think it's a secret. So many institutions have been public institutions have been privatized by a clique of individuals who do cream skimming, cherry picking. And I think everybody is so stupid. Yeah. So that even the academy and the whatever is known, and even the bar to some extent, I think you will notice there's a big debate regarding arbitration, regarding mediators. The cream schemers are all over the place. They are a cartel who are they are very clever. They're clinical, clever, and sometimes also very clumsy. But I think the rest are stupid. That has really affected the legal profession that the younger people are going to inherit. But stand up for your rights. Don't give up the fight. Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Thank you so much, Prof. What you're saying is just very true. A pure reflection of the current practicing that we are facing today. Now, Prof, to our last question. Assume that you're speaking directly to a first-year student in Africa today. What is this single lesson you want them to carry with them throughout their pursuit of legal scholarship?
What would the younger, especially, you're saying probably first year. Okay. I am speaking to myself in 1988. Is it true? I assume I'm talking to myself in 88, 89. They may not be me, because some are maybe me, some may not be. But in this case, there is this villager who is coming to Nairobi to study. The only first time he crossed Nairobi was when he went to Kangaroo High School in Embu in 87 National Drama Festivals. That's the only time he passed through Nairobi. But now he's coming to Nairobi to study. Okay, let's just say this is first year. What did you do? First year, study seriously, study reviewed and refereed material. In your case, study the course outline, are guided by the course outline and syllabus of issues. These are materials which the lecturer has looked at and has thinks, and there is a logical sequence in which they are arranged. Try to read it in that logical sequence. Study now whatever subject you are interested in, study the Constitution, because the Constitution now covers almost all the subjects we do. Unlike the 1969 Constitution, the 2010 Constitution applies to almost all areas of law, and in any case, it's the supreme law anyway. So study the Constitution, and I always tell them that read it at least twice in a month, cover to cover. Then, and then when you are going to certain classes, you read the relevant sections. There's no other way of putting it. There is no other way that you are going to get wisdom without reading the Constitution appropriately and appreciating it. Then number two is, of course, consult and seek assistance from peers, classmates, peers, whether they are classmates in law or they are classmates in political science, that classmates in sociology, in other areas, etc. Some of them is just about how to study. Some of them are subject related. So talk to people, just make that. But also, thirdly, and in an interdisciplinary matter, I've dealt with that. But also number three is that have a social life. Have also a social life. As I think the younger people normally say, have a life. If you just some of us somehow don't quite have a life in first year. I guess some of my colleagues used to call me professor even in first year, because I was not because I was that very intelligent, because we had very, very smart people in my class. But I don't deny that I could also appreciate legal issues. But it was because I was like a bookworm. And I think some of us missed out on a bit of the social life, which is also that's also a bit of a regret. But I don't cry too much. I don't cry too much, because it also helped me. I could only do so much. You are an intern being mentored. You have school to do. What time will you also have to go to Vuras, Carnival, as we used to call Vuras? Do you have the money to go there? Are you missing out on that? So the issue is, check deal with your situation. Pambana na hali yako. Also, pambana na hali yako. If your economy is not that good, don't regret it too much. It's okay. You can't be going to restaurants and bars every day. But once you get a little money once in a while, a glass of wine is okay. What will be in good company, in trusted company, so that if anything happens, you are safe. So I think I would just say that and some of us are also very spiritual and also religious. Consider that's a personal decision, but it's because we thought that there are so many things we cannot understand in life unless we go spiritual and religious. So this is about balancing intellectual quotient with emotional quotient and with social quotient, so that we can deal with all these situations. And when the worst comes to the worst, always remember a poem that I think I cited I've always like citing it, including to first years and elsewhere. Think of Jonathan Carrera's poem, Grass Will Grow. When things become very thick, think of, Lord, give my hand strength. Should you take my child, Lord? Give my hand strength to dig his grave. Cover him with earth. Lord, send a little rain, for grass will grow. Because grass will grow if we have faith in what we are doing. Thank you.
Wow, Thank you so much, Prof, for that profound closing message. And now we have come to the end of our conversation. We would like to quickly turn to the questions because we have quite a number of them. First and foremost, I see Benedicta. No, Benedicta just says our network is weak. Michelle says, such a wonderful pleasure to Prof. Shares knowledge with us this evening. Thanks so much, Daktari, for this. Sheila Bahati, the oracle is in the house. 1.5 hours won't be enough to conceptualize, to problematize, and to contextualize. Okay, that's just a comment. Then Lata Hussein, the oracle himself. Emoit says, we are blessed to have the oracle. Sheila Bahati again says, a kind question to Prof. What could be the reason why some postgraduate students take longer before completing? And what would be his advice? So maybe we can mark that as question number 1, Prof. Mark Sayaga, wow, professor mentoring another professor. Lata Hussein, after the Supreme Court stopped BBI amendment, how can Kenya's constitution be reformed to meet today's realities without being hamstrung by its own rigid amendment procedures, yet remain enduring? So perhaps, Prof, we can take the 2 questions. The first one from Sheila. What could be the reason why some postgraduate students take longer before completing, and what would be your advice?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's you said that's from Ms. Sheila Bahati.
Sheila Bahati.
Yeah. If I mispronounced, I'm sorry. So some postgraduate students take long before. I think this is mainly about LLM and PhD. Let me work on a 3-pronged typology. Number 1, LLB generally finish early, partly because of it is much more structured. Everything is structured. Everything is timed and structured. LLM and PhD. Some aspects are limited, are timed and structured, like the coursework. They are timed and structured. But some of the challenges may relate to the coursework, but most of them seem to relate to what these days we call the research project, which basically you used to call it thesis, and LLB it's called dissertation. And here, many stakeholders have sinned and fallen short of God's glory, and we need all repentance. Number 1, many students in LLM and PhD are full-time. Most, not necessarily all, but most are full-time employees in very, very busy organizations. They're probably in government. Some are judges, some are magistrates, some are in state council, some are in public benefit organizations, some are in private law firms. And as we know, as of now, LLM and PhD are taught only in the evening. So, and that the reality is that many of them are coming from work to go to the relevant classes, whether online, largely online. Sometimes they used to be physical. So the reality is that the LLM, the PhD student also has quite a full plate, and balancing it has not been easy. I've seen some LLM students, for example, combine the following: LLM, and they have a thesis or research paper to write. They are doing the LLM, they are doing Kenya School of Law, postgraduate diploma, and they are also working full-time. Yeah. I've seen that. Yeah, and some of them actually even pass. I don't know. Yeah, but some they are then held back by certain timelines. Then number 2 is also the lecturer, supervisor. And here, please note, whenever I have mentioned lecturers, I am one of them. I hope I did not say they. I did not point finger. The lecturer, us, we. The reality of the situation is that the supervisors are also working in very difficult national and institutional structures where issues of they have also the issue of, for some, the workload. For some, it is basically the pay that needs to go with it. And some of the students, I think, probably have had something called direct service provider, which is for lecturers and non-teaching staff for services rendered. Many of you, the students have heard of CBA, collective bargaining agreements, when some of these, and the collective bargaining agreements are financial and are also non-financial, just generally what terms and conditions of service, working environment, facilities, etc., etc. So those are some of the issues. And then there are also, thirdly, administrative matters, issues of administrative empathy, administrative serious and administrative support and engagement. For lecturers and for students. Those things are real in many, especially African universities. I'm not suggesting that Western universities are perfect, but in universities such as South Africa, they are trying to do the best in balancing all these issues, the financial and the related terms, other terms, non-financial terms and conditions of service, so that the environment is good. But by administrative here, I also mean generally toxic working environments, generally a lackadaisical attitude. What did I say? An non-empathetic attitude towards people who deliver these services. There's a need for greater engagement and greater empathy, and the systems that everybody feels they are fair, administrative systems. So many of these are many times at school levels. So, et cetera, et cetera. So the governance issue, the management administrative question is a real issue that I have heard this from many colleagues, that they teach, they research, and they supervise to support the students' families, and for God and country, because the general environment, the general incentive mechanisms are not ready. I think that it's just good to confront some of these things realistically. And the alternative is to say, just let people pass. I've also seen sometimes an attitude that, okay, here, just correct this, a few mistakes here. There's also that attitude. There are just a few things, just correct these ones, and then so this attitude, these are issues which are in Kenya and Africa must be debated for quality standards and relevance. There was the issue of BBI. Did I hear that?
Yep. Yes, there's a question on BBI.
The experience we have had at the Supreme Court. Thank you for that question. That if I recall well, and you can correct me, the Supreme Court, the BBI went to the High Court, went to the Court of Appeal. It was in the Supreme Court. Let me summarize the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that 2 out of 7 issues were problematic. So if we corrected those, would amendments pass? Not necessarily, because we may create even new other problems. And these were basically that one of them was that the president cannot initiate a constitutional amendment, etc., or a state officer for that matter. And then I think there was the issue of IEBC must take the leadership in the IEBC must take the leadership in delimiting constituencies, create them in terms of boundaries, in terms of population and naming, number and naming. Boundaries, number, naming. But there were, even in the Supreme Court, there were problems. Number one, and with those 2 issues. Number one, Here the president was not an initiator. In fact, initiate is not a constitutional term. The term used in 255 to 257 is promoter. And a person other than the president was actually the promoter. But even if you say that that's academic, that's really not realistic. Let me ask this question. Who in this country can have intellectual, political, and financial and related logistical or administrative resources to facilitate a constitutional amendment? The lessons I learned from BBI is that it's not you, it's not me. It's not an NGO. It is, and then you ask the question, what if we have a really popular president, elected popular, and we agree that president has won hands down? And then number two, that president has very progressive ideas that resonate with the people and has been subjected to public participation in various ways and should lead us in a reform, in amendment. And you also argue that, look, but that president cannot easily use parliament because parliament may be hostile and the president is not in parliament. Unlike 1969, the president is not in parliament. And using the parliamentary route many times is not that easy unless it is bribe and intimidation and related measures. Those are issues that we've reflected on in BBI. I just tell people, read BBI and read those materials before you criticize some of these things. Of course, there are some areas which are problematic, but there's a lot of thought that went into these things. So unless it's somebody at presidential level, you may have a president who is very popular and very progressive, but the president is does not control the house. And you know, the house sometimes is a rogue house. A house that basically focuses on bribe and related issues. So those are some of the issues that we may need to consider into the future. Then, in terms of amendment of the issue of constituencies, I know that some people really quarrel that how could Kiambu be given 12 out of 70? Of course, some of those things can be issues. But in an amendment that is subjected to referendum, we, the people, can change almost anything in the constitution, by the way, theoretically. And we should not be bound, and I'm glad that the Supreme Court also found the way we agreed, we talked that there's nothing like basic structure doctrine, which is used in India, because for us, 255, 257 dictate that. And if it's something that is in 255, then it must be subjected to a referendum. But these are some of the difficult issues. I would say that this issue requires even a different workshop or seminar or activity that continuous ones, because this is my point on BBI related issues. The reality is this: Kenyans are ahead of the constitution at any given time, including 2010, by the way. My argument is that the constitution of 2010 is no longer the ground norm. If you understand Kelsen, if we understand Hans Kelsen, it's not the basic norm. It's not necessarily the vox gist, the spirit of the people. The people have moved on. And some of the issues that I mentioned about amendment, which many people mention, means that we are beyond 2010. If we are talking about 47 are not appropriate for us, yet 47 is the one in the constitution, it means that we are beyond 2010. If you are saying that gender in terms of electoral representation is not addressed properly, we are beyond 2010. If you are saying that every time we have a presidential election, we are likely to have a presidential petition or the street, and then we have a handshake, a broad-based government, a what? It means that the parameters of 2010, the variable, are not working properly. And that, so that the presidential legitimacy comes much later after election, not immediately with the electoral process. It means that there's a fundamental problem even with our electoral system. And some people are saying we should even go to mixed member proportional representation beyond what we have first past the post. Those are issues that require us to rethink 2010. And that's how I continue to have these discussions. My fear, many people's fear, is that many times, unfortunately, most amendments in the past have been proposed amendments or even new constitution making have been hijacked. Even the Joya case hijacked Bomas and distorted it, etc. I think I would stop there and say that we have a lot of issues that we need to continue addressing. But don't give up the fight. Don't give up the fight.
Thank you very much. Oh, you're still going on, Prof?
No, I just said don't give up the fight. We should not give up the fight.
Okay. Yeah, our time is up, and I would kindly request for 10 more minutes. And Prof, kindly just if you can respond quickly to the questions so that we are not taking too much time. Our time is already up. So the audience, kindly bear with us because I think some of these questions are very important. So our next question is from Oliver Augustine. He says, a very good session. A question for Prof. Can a referendum act as a similar tool in removing a head of state? So maybe you can respond quickly and we move to the next one, Prof.
I've heard that being proposed by some people, but the constitutional parameters are like this. If you want to remove, by head of state here, we mean president. Head of state is a very difficult term in the constitution. It's used very, very rarely. Okay, how to remove the president? It's clearer that you remove the president through the next election, that's a constitutional removal. You remove the president through impeachment, or you remove the president through a declaration of a problem in terms of capacity, in terms of issues of physical and mental health issues, which is itself problematic because we are being told that now if somebody has a physical or mental problem, and the mental problem is something we should really address, and physical, then they're being removed, but there is no provision for rehabilitation. And that's really not good. Okay, so the issue of referendum in the Kenya 2010 seems to be more focused on the way it's understood, 255 to 257 in terms of amending the constitution. There has been a different debate which goes like this. In many countries, we have referendum to change, for example, law, to change policy, for example, to introduce marijuana, which has been a debate in Kenya. Somehow, a side debate. But in some countries, you do that. But there has been an issue of whether that legislation is appropriate. So to remove the president using a referendum, I don't see. Oh, Dr. Asala, this is a methodological question which I need to use the Oliver question to respond to. When you interpret the control, start by text, go to structure, go to history or practice. And all those three tell me that Kenya, with its constitution and similar constitutions, there is no textual provision on referendum to remove a president. The structure of the constitution seems to be that it's not a tool for removing the president. The history in Kenya and related countries doesn't provide that. Or if you like, you can go to literary meaning, golden rule, as well as the mischief rule, etc., etc. But so we have to use those rules of interpretation, and that's what we used to recover BBI, which was lost so badly in the High Court. By the Supreme Court, we had recovered quite a lot of ground.
Okay. Sheila, again, what does Prof have to say on the issue of lawyers and non-lawyers in regard to court-annexed mediation?
Briefly, that's one of the hottest issues in town in Kenya. And now many are advertising. My view is this. If we look at the Constitution again in terms of text, structure, and history, and we look at what are the key means of resolving disputes, there is litigation, and then there is ADR. And ADR, the Constitution seems to talk about the issues of negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. And arbitration also courts now are quite, and many people are not happy about it because it has been hijacked in a certain way, and the arbitration is not being appropriate in many situations. It's still being used, etc. So mediation, especially court annexed mediation, a matter is already in court, and the court indicating that it is these non-lawyers who are to help with this. I personally think that we need to discuss it a little more. As of now, we should stop using non-lawyers. I would say that we should probably use lawyers more because they are trained. Please note that we used to have. I've been teaching this. We used to in my lifetime. We used to have a district magistrate, DM 1, 2, and 3, and the 3 one used to be a lay magistrate. And from around 1989 amendments to the Advocates Act, etc., most of the developments in Kenya and in many parts of the common law and even Commonwealth, people rarely talk of Commonwealth these days, is that people who are engaged in dispute resolution, especially those related to courts, ought to be trained. And now we don't have shortage of these. I think we are about 25,000 lawyers around, and there isn't enough work to go around. As of now, I would just say that let us start, because some lawyers are being given a bad name that, they are extortionists, they drink wine at the expense of the client, they overcharge, etc. Those issues are things which can be dealt with. In some cases, they are true, and that some really are not even competent. Yeah, which part of our society is 100% competent and not corrupt and charging fairly? These are teething problems that can be resolved. As of now, we have enough lawyers to help solve these problems, and non-lawyers can be trained in other environments. As long as a matter has gone to court, a matter is in court. And we are being told, these may be anecdotes, but they are important. We are being told that in some matters, a matter was in court, and then there was, I think it was like divorce. Yeah, I think, yeah. Then the person is being brought, the non-lawyer is being brought, and then the lawyer, they say that every meeting we pray about this issue. Let's pray about this issue. Let the spouse, the lady and the gentleman have a dinner date and report to him as a way of resolving the problem. Go and have a dinner, you and your spouse. You can resolve this thing over dinner. In terms of almost like compelling how to approach it. So please, there are so many things which are happening without fully understanding the legal and socio-cultural issues. Thanks.
Okay, another question from Lata. Basic structure. After the Supreme Court's decision, has Kenya implicitly adopted a basic structure doctrine? And if so, what unamendable principles does it guard?
BBI happened when I was teaching con law, and I'm still teaching it. And some students asked me in class, does Kenya have a basic structure doctrine? I said, what is that? Who is that? What animal is that? Have I ever told you about the basic structure doctrine under 2010? And I will still ask that question. What is that animal? Okay, fine. There's the issue of a structure. Every constitution has a structure. Right? In the way they're arranged, the way provisions relate to another, every constitution has a structure. Fine. Is that a basic structure that's common? Yes. But is that a basic structure doctrine? No. Not in the way it's understood in Indian and German constitutional jurisprudence. No. In the sense that it's an unamendable clause. Because those have been working with a system whereby Parliament is the main amending agency. And referendum clauses are not in some of those constitutions. But let me just go, because you reminded us about time, Dr. Asala. Let me just go to what is it implicit? I'm glad that the Supreme Court explicitly said what we had been saying, that there's nothing like basic structure doctrine in Kenya based on text, structure, and history. Number issue, an amendable clause. Is there an amendable clause? The answer is no. Just read 255 to 257. Much as what is in 255 are not necessarily like when you talk about sovereignty of the people, it is not necessarily referring to Article 1. It's referring to the concept of sovereignty whenever deployed or operationalized in the Constitution. It's not necessarily. So, yeah, because some people read the 255 very narrowly to say that this is equal to that article. This is mentioned. No, that can also be an issue of debate. But would we argue that an amendable clauses is desirable? That's a different question. That's an ought question, not an is question. So Kelsen's positivism and what you call classical and analytical positivism is fighting there with the natural law school, which is what would be desirable. As of now, we don't have an unamendable clause. Let me put it that way. But would we like an amendable clauses? I think it would be desirable. Because come to think of this, that somehow an amendment could turn Kenya into a single party state, theoretically. Yeah. An amendment would, if the majority, what Wachira Maina sometimes likes calling temporary majorities, because even when we have a majority in a referendum, they may be because of the political affiliations and coalitions at that time. And Kenyan politics is very, very dicey. I think, Dr. Asala, we've been discussing with you in that other context, the concept of transition, which one day we should discuss. Kenyan politics is complicated, the most complicated in the world. So the majority today is not the majority, necessarily the same majority in terms of party affiliation, tribal affiliation, gender, age affiliation the next week. So should we be detained by the majority, temporary majority at a given time, who can amend the constitution to even say that Kenya will have we abolish some of the offices that we know. We'll have one legislative assembly, for example. That can be done. By a majority can be concocted to do that. So it would be desirable. It is not desirable to have an amendable clauses. But what to say is not amendable for me, I would not go there. We can discuss those in details another day.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Another question from Lata. Where does the judiciary's power to review constitutional amendments end and the people's sovereign power to remake their constitution begin?
Just a second. What is the people's power?
Where does the judiciary's power to review the constitutional amendments end and the people's sovereign power to remake their constitution begin?
Okay. Okay. Let me start with we the people. Okay. No, let me just start with the way it has been framed. Okay. Let me respect the question and the way they've started with the judiciary's power to review an amendment. The judiciary's power to review an amendment should be seen to be different from Njoya. 2010, Njoya seemed to say that the courts had a lot of powers in terms of interpretation and in terms of reviewing amendments, etc. The 2010 Constitution is very, very clear on jurisdiction of courts. and is also conscious in Articles 1, 159 and others. Also, you can also look at Article 10 and 47, that we the people have a lot of power, and that we the people are above all the institutions of government. All institutions of government, let's focus on the key ones. The key ones are being the legislature led by the speakers, the executive led by the president and the governors, and the judiciary led by the CJ. So all these are subordinate to we the people. So there are certain decisions when we the people have made which ought not to be reviewed by the courts. And that is different from reading Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison, Chief Justice John Marshall, 1803, the one that introduced judicial review in the world, especially common law world, was seeing the judiciary as being the ultimate. And I also say, yes, Marbury and Madison and Chief Justice Marshall were right, that the judiciary is the ultimate in reviewing decisions, including of the legislature, etc., etc. But 2010 Constitution is not a footnote to America's Chapter 3 of the US Constitution. America is structured in terms of judicial superiority that way. Kenya is structured in terms of sovereignty of the people. And at the time they were writing this, the relationship between we the people and the judicial power, especially the Supreme Court power, had not been clarified the way now we know sovereignty has been clarified. So I would just say that the people have an absolute power. The problem is how they come together to do this. What is the critical mass? What is the critical minimum? And that also relates with that issue of removing a president. What is the critical minimum of a people who in some countries could remove a president through mass action, through popular revolts, etc., etc. Yeah, and some would say that we, the people, can stop the judiciary and can even demonstrate against the judiciary when it overreaches itself. And that's the reading of Article 37 as read by our courts. Our courts have been clear that issues of demo, even against the judiciary that is overreaching itself in nullifying popular initiatives, popular amendments, popular control making. Unfortunately, control making is something that happens probably just once in a lifetime, in a generation. It happened in 2010. It's so complex. It's so difficult. But if we, the people, can create the control moment, so be it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Imoit is relating to the case of Kesavananda, yeah, where the Supreme Court of Kenya found that the basic structure doctrine applied in Kenya. What was the basis for that extrapolation?
That's not my reading of Supreme Court in BBI. My reading is that they agreed with us. That one we won hands down. That BSD, Kenya, and we had argued that the colonial text, the colonial structure, the colonial history does not allow for importation of basic structure doctrine from India or from any other jurisdiction. And some of us even argued that we cannot use a PhD dissertation to override our constitutional text.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another one, quick one from Ezra Cheruyot. What is the advantage of a senior lawyer establishing their own law firm?
What is that?
Advantage of a senior lawyer establishing their own law firm.
Oh, three problems. Let me just mention them quick fire, rapid fire. Number one is professional development. I think one, it would be you could help secure justice in an easier way. Some of us, for example, we had been constrained because many times we had to act through other advocates, and sometimes you did not necessarily agree with the way the law firm had filed the papers, and that's part of my memoirs. Sometimes they filed in a way that you really didn't agree, but you were just part of the team. You had no. So it's a question of the quest for justice. You can help secure justice better. Number two is that there can be issue of professional satisfaction. That it's many times easier to secure professional satisfaction, and also uh, as a senior lawyer, you are also now contributing to professional development based on your learning over the years. And number three, and you have had some experiences. Number three is, of course, also the issue of financial and related rewards can also be there. But I think there's a time we discussed how somebody can be in more than one occupation or profession. You are in the bar and you're also in the academy, etc. I think many times you have to also engage assistants and interns in each one of them to work with and to mentor them and to work with. So yes, senior lawyers, senior advocates can really help develop develop the profession if they open own law firms. Reasonable independence, reasonable
Okay.
financial reward.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, another question from Oliver. What is another question for Prof? What is his view of having paralegals in the legal space, and what should their impact be?
Paralegals in the
Legal space, and what should their
okay.
impact be?
Yeah, paralegals are important, just like paramedics, and that's a question. Luckily, I used to train. We used to train a lot of paralegals when I was at Public Law Institute. I was mentored in public interest lawyering by Dr. Okio Kombaka at Public Law Institute, PLI, which also took this case of Wangari Maathai versus Kenya Times Media Trust. Kanu wanted to build in Nairobi, in Uhuru Park. Kanu wanted to build its headquarters there. And paralegals include court assistants, who originally used to be called court clerks, court assistants, the assistants or clerks in the lawyers' firms, the people who are called legal secretaries, etc., etc. So paralegals, not all of us can be or should be lawyers in society generally, or even in the legal profession. There are so many other roles that ought to be performed by others, and it is, and many of them have had an impact a lot. There are so many court clerks who really help in preparing papers, drafting papers, like so many things, land transactions, even intellectual property, trademark, patent transactions, so many. There are so many forms, what is called prescribed forms that we fill in. And the court clerks are very, very good in that. And I think it would be a lot of waste of an advocate's time to fill in some of those forms. I think it's just not the right way to do business. But we also need, so that we need to train people who can do them. And many of them are having an impact. Even in the law school, so many of our administrators, secretaries, I remember that as an administrator, whether as chair of department or dean, I used to empower our secretary, the secretaries I worked with, to do some of the basic, like letter writing, etc., things like that. And many of them are very, very good. In fact, Dr. Sala, as part of this mentoring and part of supporting our students, I always urge them to talk a lot to the administrators, to talk a lot to the clerks, the secretaries, not just that, where's my transcript, where's my, no, they know a lot about how legal, so there's so many things that they know, and which is very, very helpful to the students and to clients out there.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sheila again. Prof, what can be done to uphold or make better the standards of the legal profession, noting that there is an increase in the number of law schools compared to your time?
What can be done to improve
To better the standards of legal profession in light of the many law schools?
One, some people would say that there's an explosion. There's a time, some people say in America that there was litigation explosion. I think some people would say that there's an explosion of law schools in Kenya. They are right, and they may not also be wrong. Because they may be wrong because let us check the number of lawyers per capita that is needed, necessary, per population. I don't think we've reached it. The 25,000 lawyers, I don't think are served, especially in a country that the culture is a very huge and complex, a huge document. And then there are so many laws. The problem is that most of our lawyers and most of the law schools seem to be concentrated in certain areas. That, I think, is the main problem. But in terms of number of lawyers and number of law schools, we should still be okay. But we need to review curriculum for standards, quality, and relevance. I'm glad that this is a debate that we have been having, we have had, and we have been having a review curriculum to reflect CBET as well as other needs which emerge, as well as, Then there is a need to open up the issue of internship and experiential learning, internships, externships, mentoring facilities, guidance and counseling, so that it's more institutionalized, because then it also improves quality, so that it's not just academic in a narrow sense. Academic is normally a positive part, but sometimes in a quote abstract. Then the way the economy is working in Kenya and many African countries also affects the bar, the legal profession generally. In fact, some people normally talk about legal professions, not just legal profession, legal professions, so that they separate, for example, the bar from the bench, from the paralegal, etc., academy, etc. So sometimes they call it the sociology of the legal professions. So each one of them has its own challenges. Like, I think the paralegal is still very little training, capacity. I think, is it only like Kenya School of Law that does some paralegal training? I'm not aware of. Yeah, still very limited. And even the bar, it's only KSL. Legally, it is liberalized, de jure, but de facto, it is still basically a KSL issue. And liberalization, not just for the sake of it, but to impart appropriate standards, quality, and relevance. But even the pre-university, are we sure that the subject choices that we have and the way we teach is appropriate preparation for legal training? I think some of us who are old-fashioned say that, do we give enough attention to literature in English? Do we give enough attention to CRE, to history? So that even if one doesn't take them in their final year, they have engaged them, because there's a way in which these subjects, So there are issues about curriculum review at all levels, not just at university, at all levels. And then the institutional framework in terms of niche. Most of the law schools are teaching basically similar subjects.
Mhm.
Tafakari hayo. Tafakari
Okay,
hayo.
Prof. Yeah, another question. Michelle, again, Prof. How should Kenyan judges, as living oracles, decide when to prioritize substantive justice over rigid rules, especially in high-stake human rights, in reference with Article 159, sub-article 2D?
The root of the question is how, or is the root, just the root, the earlier part of it.
Yeah,
should,
how the
or
Kenyan
what?
judges, yeah,
Yes.
how Kenyan judges should decide to prioritize substantive
It's
justice
okay. It's okay.
over
It's okay.
rigid rules.
That's okay. That's okay. Should prioritize HR. Wow. There's 2010. Let's start with, I always start with is, then was, then ought to be reform. Well, the 2010 Constitution is very strong on the Bill of Rights. It's very transformative, progressive, includes ECOSOC rights, economic, social, cultural rights, which were not in 1969. The judiciary also, whether you look at 159 or other clauses of the Constitution, and even if you look at Articles 22, 23, has more powers on questions of locus standing. I mean, like, standing capacity to bring a case. The remedies that can be available are much more expansive, and therefore we should not have the problems we used to have, like Anarita Karimi, where the court used to say that, have you specifically pleaded, or in some cases the court used to say that I, the Chief Justice, I have the power to make rules for the implementation of the Bill of Rights. I have not done so, so the human rights are not implementable. We should not have that kind of problem.
Yeah.
But there are some areas in which the courts still have a bit of a challenge. I respect courts, I respect judges, their job, and magistrates, their job is very difficult, balancing different interests. But there are some areas in which I still think that some judges and magistrates, faced with the question of the Bill of Rights, faced with the question of liberty, are still more executive-minded than the executive. To quote Lord Atkin in Liverseat versus Anderson. Or if you look at what Professor J.B. Juang and Professor Otieno Dek wrote in a 1988, I think 1988 article, the judiciary insensitive areas of public law. They were analyzing human rights litigation in Kenya. And I think what they said at the time is true in many African countries, that when sometimes the judiciary is faced with that question of horizontal rights, horizontal Bill of Rights, an individual vis-a-vis an individual, a government department vis-a-vis a government department, then they tend to be fair. But then when they're faced with vertical rights, the individual vis-a-vis certain state agencies, then sometimes, so that is still a problem area which was there in 1980s, which needs still to be looked at. I know there's a lot of change through the text of the Constitution and through litigation, but there are certain still challenges that in this area that our judges and magistrates could and lawyers, advocates, because unfortunately some of our own lawyers are also very retrogressive on human rights issues and Bill of Rights issues. Show me the money and then they will argue anything. Show me them the check.
Okay, Prof. And to our last question, Michelle. Also, Prof, the courts have struck down major laws like the CAS appointments due to lack of meaningful public participation. Is this requirement becoming a technicality that hinders governance?
Excellent. Again, all these questions are excellent. Well, look, where does one start? I actually public participation is another area that we really okay, and also issue of declaration of unconstitutionality. And thirdly, the consequences of such declarations. I think those are the areas which will one day need more treatment. But let me just say this, that public participation is in 2010 and is very strong. There are so many clauses, more than 18 probably clauses that deal with public participation. That's number one. Number two, courts, since the early days of the 2010, for example, Justice Odunga in the Kiambu case, and now so many cases in the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, have declared so many statutes, so many decisions, etc., unconstitutional. Because of PP, let's just focus on the issue of PP. Because of PP, because there are many other reasons. And then they have also helped define what PP is in terms of it should be substantial, substantive, substantial, should be related to the various relevant contexts. It's not just ticking the box, etc., the way many times is being done. So, but sometimes we have also been told, I was talking to some people, they also say that sometimes the expectations of PP can be very difficult and very unrealistic and very expensive, because almost at every stage. So some of these things need to be looked at through appropriate PP policy, reviewing the relevant legislation and reviewing the Constitution. Yes, again, I said that, reviewing the Constitution. Yeah, and especially in light of the fact that, for example, we have 3 legislative assemblies. If some matters need to go through 2 legislative assemblies or more, at every point there should be some PP. And how do we deal with this? So sometimes it has become, unfortunately, it's also been abused quite a lot by just being made a technicality that we have ticked the box, and it's not always very easy to prove that they didn't do what they are claiming to have done. And sometimes the courts have just looked the other side. So in many cases, the courts have struck them down for lack of PP. In others, in some cases, I've also seen that the courts have just said it's okay, but if you look at it, there was no substantive PP. There was just a clever way of calling certain category of people to a restaurant and giving them a pre-agreed position. They sign their names, they are given appropriate allowances, and voila, we have done it. We have done PP. So this is an area that...
Thank you so much, Prof. Mem Muketha says, thank you, Prof. and Daktari, for the session. It was a wonderful one. Mentors Leadership Foundation says, how do I read Kodralka? It's too wordy, though very enjoyable. Then Joe Onyango says, wise nuggets for those transitioning to KSL. And Lata finally advises you should consider vying for political elective seat like your mentor Kajwang. So Prof, it's been a pleasure hosting you. You know, when the oracle is in the house, you don't want to stop. You just want to listen to the oozing wisdom and then the knowledge. And we truly appreciate you accepting to come to talk to us, to mentor the young ones, and just to make a contribution. So thank you very much. And to our audience, we are really sorry. We are 30 minutes above our time. But you will agree that it has been beneficial to all of us. So thank you, everyone, and good night. Unless, Professor, you have any closing remarks?
Only to say thank you, Dr. Evelyn Asala, my colleague, for this opportunity and for the engagement. Thank you so much, participants, for being there and for engaging by asking very important questions, which show that we really have still a lot of work to do. And Wish you well all. Go ye forth and continue reading, reflecting, resting at 3 hours, conceptualizing, problematizing, and aluta continua, Victoria Esata.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening and God bless you. Bye.